Good morning. It is time for the Mike Hewitt Show, brought to you by RenegadeRiver.com. And now your host, Mike Hewitt.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Full studio this morning. Jim Riley riding shotgun. Ludwig von Wiedendorsky defending acting as the wall between us. Looks like Trump did build a wall.
My protection, baby.
You got to have, when the guy riding shotgun needs protection, we're in trouble. Of course, Pax is keeping us in line, helping Brian Thomas. Thank you all. Folks, thank you very much for listening in this morning. Listen, I am a political monkey or political wonk, whichever you'd like to call
monkey.
Me. A monkey. Yeah,
I love it.
I'm okay with it. I really am. I'm pretty secure. But we're right in the middle of the biggest Super Bowl politically in my life. I've never seen anything like it. I started watching the first presidential campaign that I really kind of focused on was 1976. Didn't understand it. I was a young teenager. I watched it right on the edge of my chair, and I've been dialed in ever since. I have never seen anything in that short span of time that compares to what we're watching. But before we dive in to yesterday's Super Tuesday again, I wanted to touch base on the just for a moment on the Flint drama that continues to percolate. No pun intended. When I listen to the numbers float around, and frankly, folks, the raw, unabashed hypocrisy of the Democratic Party, and I'm not trying to be partisan, I can't help it. I'm watching Congressman Kildee, who claims to have his arms around Flint, and he's aghast at what was allowed to happen, and it's all Governor Snyder's fault. I thought, wait a minute, you said that all in one sentence? You've got your arms around Flint, you've got your feet on the ground, you're the man, you're the one that represents the poor people, and you didn't know this? But Snyder did, 200 miles away. Stop it, folks. Stop it. A 7-1 Democratic council voted for a train wreck. I don't know how else to put it to you. But let me tell you what it's going to cost you. Kildee says $195 million is nothing. And he demands way more. And I think, $195 million? What the heck can I build with $195 million? Folks, we've got some serious problems in our political arena. We just do. We're going to pay over $1 million to defend Snyder's legal bills. And I think, lawyers? What do lawyers have to do with fixing the water problem in Flint, Michigan? Folks, we have a serious problem, and that's going to take me back to the primary that we should be talking about right now. One of the things that I've been trying to get my head around the whole time we've been watching this unfold, for the last 6 months, by the way, is why do people support Trump? Listen, I've endorsed Cruz. I like Cruz. I'm an originalist. I'm a constitutionalist. By the way, those words fit together. I look to the Constitution and say, what was the intent? That's what we followed. The Constitution allows for a mechanism to change it if we don't like it. But, folks, we cannot ignore it and still be an organized society. It's just that's how I see it. I know there are folks that disagree with me, and I respect them. That's my view. So when I look at Trump, I go, where's this guy coming from? I take that back. I get where he's coming from. I have a tough time following why people would follow him as devoutly as they do until, listen close, until I hear $195 million, I can't even think that way, isn't anything, and $1 million legal fund makes sense. When I hear those things, I go, I get it. I know why the people are absolutely enraged and get behind somebody who's willing to stand up and say, enough, shut up, we're not going to take it. I get why people support the man. I'm still an originalist. I'm still a constitutionalist. I'm hurting myself along. I'm trying to get there. I get it. When I do the math, we're going to drill into the math a little bit as soon as I get off my soapbox. I get why the man is successful. First off, he knows how to work the media. Now, the typical thing where I've got the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other. I get that he's a master at the media. I also know the media tends to be uber left. Not just a little left, uber left. And I wonder whether they're not leading him and us off the edge of a cliff. I do wonder that. I can't help but wonder that. That aside, when I look at the numbers, $20 trillion, $195 million, according to a congressman that's got his arms around his city, but didn't know what his own party was doing. I get why people are angry. I get it. But I've equated, I've paused and say, is this like if I'm mad at Ruger, and so I think I'm going to go buy a Ruger and shoot myself in the foot? I wrestle with that a little bit, thinking, is this the path that anger should take us? But I'm starting to understand at least why. You folks have heard me talk about my friend that we text back and forth. And listen, he represents a lot of folks. When he says, burn it down, he's talking about Washington, D.C., and he's talking about the Republican Party. And by the way, he's been a Republican. Him and I went to school together, high school. I've known him for a few years. He is a devout Republican. He's a constitutional conservative, and he's a Trump supporter. I have a tough time adding that up. I do. But listen, he's as honest as can be. He thinks this whole system is a train wreck. And I have a tough time going, yeah, but, because he's probably right. Now, we differ on the cure, but yet he's probably right. And if you're driving on a road right now thinking I'm being sensational, you've not looked at the layers and layers and layers and layers of taxes we talked about on this show that still leave you with a $20 trillion debt with fake printed money and loans to your greatest enemy, China. I go, what? We're borrowing from the people that want to destroy us, and we think that's good. We do? I get what he's saying when he says, enough. Burn it down. If they want to do something different, I've had enough. That's what he says. That's a guy that's been a Republican that I know of for almost 40 years. And by the way, when I say a Republican, not just a fella that voted, somebody that wrote checks, got involved, did door hangers for Ronald Reagan. We can go back that far. When he says enough, I hate the term establishment. But they better listen. And not just the GOP establishment. By the way, I don't even believe there is an establishment. Just as a little side note, I think it's money people. I think the money people, and by the way, I put Trump on that list. The money people, whether they're Democrat or Republican, I think the money people that control us like we're Pinocchios, I think they need to be stopped. Flatly stopped. They are cutting off what a Republican form of government is supposed to be. He's right about that. If they cannot get themselves down to allow one vote, all of the rest of the cliches we've grown up being taught that our system is, if they can't get out of the way, man, it's hard to argue with my friend Miles because I think he might be right. I'm still not a Trump guy, but I think he might be onto something. So when we get to the Enigma Report this late in the show, we're going to talk about violence. That's an enigma to me, but I'll leave that part of... I'll leave the rest of this part of anger for that part of the show. In the meantime, let's look at the delegate counts. Trump's at 621. By the way, we still do not know who won Missouri. Have either one of you fellas heard who won Missouri?
As of the way in this morning, it was still too close to call, and they should know sometime today.
So they've got it at like was it 0.2% or something like that?
It was as of last night. At one point, with 99% reporting, Trump had a 3,400 vote lead, according to Karl Rove.
But isn't Missouri a non-winner take all? Yeah. So isn't it moot at this point?
It is a little moot. It is a little moot, other than the psychology of what goes into the politics,
and that's important. And I think that's a good point.
It is important, and you're exactly right. Though it's almost an exact split between Cruz and Trump in the great state of Missouri.
A win's a win.
A win is a win, and when you walk away from a 5-state deal and you're not a winner in those states, I look at Kasich, by the way, and listen, I'm a Cruz guy, so when I look at Kasich, I'm going, what are you doing this to us for? Because I see it as the establishment, whoever they are, the money people, poking us in the eyeball, and I'm in allegiance with my friend Miles. When I get poked in the eyeball, I want to poke them back. It's hard for me not to say, enough, stop it. You have no path to anything. You're just being a butt face. Can I say that? Yeah, he's a butt face. I can't think of any other way to say it. The guy's a Common Core guy. This explains it to me.
After last night, I really felt it came down to now it's a Trump-Kasich race. I don't see... Cruz has a path, but it's almost
a Trump
fate.
Who did you see a race?
Trump-Kasich.
You think it's a Trump-Kasich
Now,
race?
that's an interesting...
Yeah.
Why do you say that?
Because, as you said, Kasich is the establishment. Kasich, at this point, is only going for a broker convention. He has
I
no
got to tell you something.
possible way
Listen,
of
I
winning.
got to tell you something on that point. And folks, you can hold me to this. It'll be recorded and posted to YouTube, so you can come back later and poke me in the eyeball for real. If they, whoever they is, overthrow the votes of the primary voting electorate and put anybody else in there other than the leader that was won by votes. And listen, I'm not a Trump guy, but if he won, he won.
Yeah.
If they flip this upside down, I will walk away from the Republican Party. And I'm not a Trump guy, but if Trump wins, if that's who the people want to be our nominee, God bless them. I'm a Trump guy. If that's what the folks want, that's what they get. So if they make a silk purse out of a sow's ear and call it Kasich, they can kiss me goodbye.
Have you seen the series on CNN about the presidential races they've been doing? They just started. It's called The Road to the White House. Last 2 weeks ago, they had the Nixon
I don't
race.
watch that stuff. So
Nixon JFK
I've
race.
watched a few little bits and pieces of it.
Well, this week was the Lincoln Douglas. And I did not know until I watched this that Lincoln was actually part of a contested convention.
Yeah, but listen, there's been a number.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, it took like 6 ballots to get him done.
Yeah.
I learned that when I was writing the first novel. But listen, when first off, that wasn't the result. The system didn't work at all like it works now.
No, it was way different.
It's an entirely
that's
different
100% true.
system.
There was
So
no nominee when they went in. They just had somebody who they assumed would be the presumptive
Everyone
winner.
just assumed he was, but there wasn't the result of a year-long or 6-month-long primary,
2 years.
primary and caucus after primary and caucus.
Yeah, no.
It was a very, very different driving force for a party nomination. Back then, the party would nominate somebody, whoever it was. Then the folks had an opportunity to vote on this nominee, that nominee, and there were more than 2 parties. Technically, there are still more than 2 parties now, but very different system. I'm only telling you, flatly, folks. I mean, and I've been a Republican all my life. I'm only a very active Republican, by the way. I'm only telling you that if they flip this upside down and bring somebody else in new, or make something out of Kasich that he isn't. By the way, I'm not attacking the guy. I think he's a great administrator. There are things when I listen to him. In fact, you and I have talked about on the show before. I was at the debate in Detroit, and he was the only person up there that I felt acted like an adult with Cruz right behind him, but not so much. So yes, he has but listen, you can't say I've won one state. We're halfway through this, by the way, folks. We're at the halfway mark. So you've got I haven't did a count this time, but I think
Cruz is at 7.
I'm sorry, Cruz is, I think, 7 states, maybe more than that. Trump is at double-digit states. Yeah. And Kasich has won his home state, period, stop, end of it. So if they try to airdrop him in, there's going to be that'll be the end of the Republican Party. There'll be a lot of diehard people like my friend Miles and I that wash our hands of it.
Well, it's funny you say it'll be the end, because right now on Forbes.com, there's a article I just saw walking in saying the death of the Republican Party, March 15th. 2016, because Rubio dropped out, and it's the end. And I'm thinking, really, it's not the end. The end is when we decide it's the end.
That's so silly talk, but that's as silly as, and by the way, this is not a shot at Trump, folks. Don't get mad at me. But that is as silly as saying that Trump is driving voter turnout when in the GOP side. When the reality of it is that Obama and his crazy policies are what's driving voter turnout. Well, now, they may be looking at Trump to saying he's our answer, but folks are running. I'm telling you, the reason that they're flat running from Obama. They're angry with the GOP for not responding to Obama. I give my friend Miles credit. He's right on that point. The GOP with McConnell and Bonner and all those folks didn't ever use the person and say, "Stop it, you rotten socialist." They let him run wild. And he's driven he's done what he promised. He's brought fundamental change to the United States, and a lot of folks are saying, "We don't want this. Stop that. This is crazy."
Matt said something though. I think that's important. The emotions are high.
Yep.
Clearly everywhere, and they certainly are with me. But Matt, you said that number one, you saw this article and read it because the headline was a grabber, and we know that there are folks out there who are desperate. Of course, you're trying to sell magazine articles and magazines and TV and radio. They are putting out inflammatory headlines. And the end of the Republican Party is a headline that any political junkie, at the very least, is going to take a look at. And then you finished off with something I think that's so wise. It isn't over when some headline writer who probably hates the Republican Party may very well be getting money from George Soros and the MoveOn.org crowd. It isn't over until the voters finish their voting. And there's plenty of time. I know last week we talked about that yesterday we'd get a lot clearer view, and I fully expected that to be the case. Clearly, it is not clear, but it's up to the voters. We'll see what happens. If the bad guys interject, then there's some issues.
It's as clear as mud. Listen, what we're going to do, folks, first off, we're getting ready to go to a break, but I want to give you something to think about while you're listening to some sponsors. I put on my Facebook page yesterday, don't stone me for asking, but is it time for Trump and Cruz to unite? So you stew on that for a minute, and we'll be right back.
And now we return to the Mike Hewitt Show, brought to you by RenegadeRiver.com.
Speaking of RenegadeRiver.com, the show is sponsored by Renegade River, and once in a while I don't do this, and I'm not very good at it, but sometimes I've got to toot my own horn a little bit. Listen, folks, RenegadeRiver.com that's a website that's owned by my shop, Renegade River. RenegadeRiver.com is loaded. Most of it is loaded with stuff that's at one of my 6 distributors. I say it that way because there's a lot of stuff on there, but I can get more. Take a look at it. You're going to find the prices are very good. Not only that, but it's not some company that's in Timbuktu or California or in Taiwan, not that there's a difference. It's right here in Michigan. Take a look at it, RenegadeRiver.com, and if you get bored looking on the internet, come visit us out in Nunica, right on M104 at the top of M231.
What exit do you take if you're coming down?
Exit 9 from either direction.
Okay,
exit 9 from either direction. You get off right off at exit 9. I'm at the bottom of the hill when you get off the highway. Listen, it's a fun shop. You're probably going to walk and think, is this 1955? Because I do things the old-fashioned way. You get a cup of coffee, we'll pick something out or not. We'll just drink coffee, maybe argue about Trump and Cruz. That's fine too. That happens all day long, every day in there. But I invite you to come visit, and I invite you to look at the website. And on that, while we're at this juncture, because I don't want to tear up the Enigma Report with my announcement, so let me just get it over with right away. Starting next Wednesday, this show will be broadcast live also on WTKG, which is 12:30 a.m. in Grand Rapids. So it'll be here. We'll still be sitting here in this studio. Brian Thomas will still be keeping the bowling ball out of the ditches, but we'll be broadcast on both, I should say. And on that note, using the word more, which was a Freudian slip, we've got some big growth coming really quick after that also. This show...
More stations.
This show has been strapped on a rocket, folks, and it's growing. So grow with us. And by the way, if you're driving down the road or if you're sitting somewhere, I think for a minute about our friend Carrie up north, who's got the little sticky note by the coffee pot to remind him this is kind of one of those shows us an appointment show. If you're listening because you set an appointment, if you own a small business and you're looking for some media coverage in both Grand Rapids and Muskegon, give me a call, 616-405-3420. So it's inexpensive sponsorship in both cities. That's a pretty good deal.
Or you can get with you on your Renegade River, Mike Hewitt Show Facebook too.
Facebook or Mike at themikehewitt.com.
There we go.
Listen, so that's how the show gets paid for, through sponsorship, and it's truly growing quick. Starting next week, but over the next 60 days, you're going to be very impressed. So if you're a small business and you want to be a part of it, give us a call or shoot us an email. Beyond that, listen, when we went to break, we were talking about the concept of is it time now for Trump and Cruz to unite? And one of the reasons it's a fascinating thing, and it really goes to what Jim Riley and specifically Matt was talking about right before the break, and that is Matt said he really sees this as a fight between Trump and Kasich. And for a second I pushed back, but the truth of it is that he's probably right. because the establishment, whoever that is, as I keep lamenting, it's just money. They're going to pour a boatload into him. When I do the math on that point, there are 1,237 delegates needed for the nomination. Trump is at 621 right now, which means he has to get 55% of the remaining 1,134 in order to walk into the convention as the nominee. I don't believe that's going to happen. Now, to me, by the way, I believe what I said earlier in the first segment, and that is this is kind of like a gimme in golf. I mean, when you're when you're a 60-foot putt and you're 10 inches from the hole, it's kind of a gimme. No one questions it. Wow, everyone claps, ooh and ah, and you walk away. That's how having said that, I get why the folks in the opposing sides within the party would disagree with me. Nevertheless, the math says he's not at 55% yet, so he needs to get 55% of the remaining. I don't think that's going to happen. On the other hand, my guy is Cruz. He's at 396, which means he needs an additional 841 delegates, or roughly 75% of the remaining delegates that are up for grabs. That's not going to happen either. That said, take that argument aside and go back to Matt's comment about Kasich. Kasich, I mean, I didn't even do the math because he can't get there. He's at 138 delegates. That's just not happening. He's over 1,000 delegates short. See, there's no path for him unless they just pour a boatload of money into the convention. Yes, there's money that are being poured into conventions, just so you know. Now, we had John Yab on the show a month ago who wrote the book Chaos. I can't remember the subtitle of the book, but it was along the lines of the coming convention. I can't remember.
Well, it explained the ins and the outs.
It explains how it works and why it's going to be a drama. But he was spot on, and so there's a lot of folks that can't stand Trump or Cruz. They look at them and are absolutely aghast by the concept of either of them being our nominee, which causes a fellow like me to say they ought to unite, okay? Because I think if they don't unite, we're in for a bumpy ride. And if they do unite, that's just done. The end of this debate is the second they say we're buddies now, that's the end of the debate and the establishment is done. That said, when I posted that on Facebook, what did you say, Matt, that my Facebook page blew up?
Oh, man. My notifications, my phone started smoking from getting so many notifications after posting on it.
I wrote, don't stone me for asking, is it time for Trump and Cruz to unite? And by the way, there were several comments that said it's time to stone you, okay? So, that was a really popular question for me to ask.
Yeah, but if you ask an outrageous question like that,
yeah,
and you sit back for a moment, you say, well, wait a minute,
it's really not outrageous.
What would happen if that? What would the results be if these two guys were to get together? Well, all of the concern, all of the angst, all of the headline writers talking about the end of the Republican Party and a contested election and all of these the faces from the past like Mitt Romney and who knows who, that's all over. This is something that if it were to happen, and my gosh, we've certainly seen the weirder bedfellows than this. If this were to happen, this changes everything. The moment it's announced.
What they really need to do is sit down and have an honest, Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan conversation, for lack of better. Yes. They really do. Now, I have to guess that is going on through back channels right now. Cruz is a very, very intelligent man. I happen to agree with you when I look at the two of them. By the way, I'm unsettled by either. I've endorsed Cruz. I love what Cruz articulates, although I understand why not everybody is appealed to him. That said, I see him as a policy guy. I think he's brilliant. I think he understands how government is supposed to work. And when I listen to Trump talk, man, he's got the sizzle, he's got the fire, he's got the media. He understands how to do that part, but he doesn't have the policy, the administrative part of how the system is supposed to work. To me as a layman, and please, folks, understand, I've endorsed Cruz. I've met him. I like him a lot. I've campaigned for him, so I'm not stepping away from my position. But the math is the math, and when I look at the math, And I think that Matt is exactly right, that they're going to get on the power air system and try to blow Kasich up as absolutely big as they can get him between now and the coming convention. I don't support Kasich. I just don't. So as much as I opined in the first segment about my view of Trump, I like Kasich less, because at least Trump is articulating the things that I mostly agree with. I don't know that he necessarily understands how he's going to achieve them. I have great reservation about that, but I would have no reservation about that if he had a guy involved in his administration with the nuts and bolts mechanical knowledge of our government like Cruz, which is why I support Cruz. Yes, Matt?
This brings a great point, because in my management class, we talk about the different levels of management.
The one you're teaching or taking?
Teaching.
I just wanted to make sure I knew.
Yep. And the top level guy doesn't need to have the skills to perform the job, meaning that actual hands-on skills. He needs to have the people skills.
I'm starting to hear Ronald Reagan.
And that's what he has. Cruz has the skills as the technical skills. He's a middle management type guy. He's not going to fire up the lower end of the spectrum to get the job done, which is what you're seeing. I like Cruz, like you said, because he's the policy guy. He's a constitutionalist. But what I think is right now, we're in 1979, 1980 again, and we need the guy who's going to fire people up, make him feel good about being in the 80s. I remember my parents talking about how Reagan made you feel good. And I see a lot of similarities. I know people, he's not Ronald Reagan. He's not. You're right. We don't need Ronald Reagan. We need, maybe it's Donald Trump. I hate when people compare somebody, it's not the next Reagan. He doesn't need to be the next Reagan.
It's not the next Reagan.
It's not. We know that.
My friend Miles says we're never going to have another Ronald Reagan, so stop it.
Exactly. But we might need a Donald Trump.
He said, this is what we got. This is what we got to get on and move on with. This is what we've got. Now, by the way, him and I have passionately debated each other. When I say passionate, it's by text. I don't know how passionate you can get in a text message, but him and I have been texting back and through almost every major event, even while I sat during the Detroit debate. I'm sitting in the hall and I'm texting me, Cruz, him, Trump. But when we broached the topic, and actually Gingrich broached the topic in an article that was published yesterday, that said they need to kiss and make up and make this unite, because if they don't, the establishment is going to pound them into the dirt.
I think they kind of had the whole time, though. I don't think Cruz has really attacked Trump. Not like the other ones.
Oh my! You get on my Facebook page right now and say you get on there and say something critical of Trump. Goodness gracious!
Yeah.
But listen, it goes both ways.
Yeah.
Both of those two campaigns have revved up their people to be against the other.
If they come together, though,
Jim? What's Fred's last name?
Captain Fred Birch.
Fred Birch, listen, is a great guy, and he responded on there. And I don't know that he ever said no, but he was probably correct in saying it's not time yet, because there's so much negative energy that needs to dissipate a little bit. Now I say, man, I pause because I've got a lot of. I think Captain Birch is a really smart fella. He may be right, but I'm afraid if we give Kasich too much time, we're gonna have I don't want any more time to pass, so I wrestle with that. The only thing that Miles and I have agreed on in this race is that would make one monster-sized ticket to have a Trump-Cruz ticket.
Well, let me just throw some what's going on forward here, the primary calendar. We're done with the Super Tuesdays for a while, but next Tuesday, Arizona, winner take all, 58 delegates. Utah, 40 delegates, which can be split around. Then the following weekend, you got some caucuses, but Wisconsin, winner take all, April 5th. Then
New York,
19th.
95 delegates to New York.
You've got New York. So,
and you know who's going to win New York, by the way, folks. Pennsylvania is 71, and you know who's going to win.
Go back. Who's going to win New York?
Trump.
You think Trump's going to win New York?
I would bet you $1,000.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well,
and listen, not only that, but he's going to win Pennsylvania, which is 71. And when you look at the big hits,
that's the following week.
It is. But
which is another Super Tuesday.
I printed the list out. The only big state that I think Cruz has a shot in, big state, by the way, folks, don't stone me, I'm a Cruz guy, but when I look at the big states, the only state that I think he's got a shot in is California.
Oh, see.
It's 172 delegates. That's like the jewel in terms of delegate jewel. Keep in mind, we're talking about Republican. We're not talking about the state in total.
You bet.
We're talking about Republican.
Now, that's not till June 7.
That is June 7th. There's 172 delegates. If that would have been an early state, and I'm right, it would have changed the makeup of what we're dealing with.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
It would have largely. It was a winner take all. It would have largely changed. It would have taken 300, almost just shy of 300 difference between their.
As before last night, they were.
It was 225 delegates difference between the two. That would almost make up the difference, assuming just that. And I really believe he's got a very solid chance. So when the Cruz people on my team hear me talk about a unity deal, they're looking at me like I've got a Cyclops eye. What? You're nuts. The best is yet to come. It's one of those things where the best laid plan is wonderful until you meet the enemy.
Well, just avoid the inflammatory headlines. One thing I think is important to understand too, because people might say, like with Rubio, why did Rubio stay so late? Because now he looked like such a fool, and he certainly suffered politically and going on forward. One of the main impediments to logical thinking, like Matt had come up with and like you had come up with, is that every one of these candidates has a staff who are very, very highly paid. Yeah. And that's their job.
And they blow a lot of smoke at him.
The moment their campaign quits or they merge, they all lose their jobs. So they have self-interest there that may not necessarily be on the benefit side to the person who's paying the bills.
Listen,
that's an interesting issue for those folks.
That is part of it, Jim. I agree. Listen, there's another part. There's part of the other thing that has to be considered when you ask why would he stay. And I've done this in business and I've done it in politics where you stay too long. And the problem with that is it's ego, by the way. And part of it is that you get so invested in it. I owned a business back in the 80s. And in fact, my friend Miles coached me heavily. Get out. All right, and he was an investor in it, and ego and passion. I'd been in the ditch for several years. It's really hard to retreat when you should. It really is. It really truly is. And listen, the problem with Rubio and the problem with me back then is that in fact, irony being what it is, I said at the time, this is me. And I'm sure that's how Rubio felt. But in truth, you take people with you. I hurt Miles, I hurt myself by staying too long. And Rubio hurt the party and he hurt himself by staying too long. I get the passion. I really, truly, how could he possibly get out before his own state? I mean, I don't agree with it, but I've made those same boneheaded decisions myself, and probably will again in my life.
You can understand it, but now we are sitting here today. Going forward, are we going to be looking at Senator Cruz 2-3 months down the road and say, oh my golly, he stayed too long? Or are we going to say, my gosh, what a brilliant combination we've got here?
You're talking about Cruz?
Well, your crazy idea of Cruz and Trump together.
Only because I don't
know the answer.
Listen, when I look forward, I think Cruz is now depending on a brokered convention as well as Kasich. My problem is this, and I believe this passionately. They're really going to have to pour on some really big rationale. If Trump gets to that convention with a lion's share of the votes, if the math is still the math like we're seeing it by percentage, and they don't nominate him, I'm gonna have a big problem. And I'm not a Trump guy, but I tell you what I am. I'm an honest guy. And if they cheat him out of it, when and forget cheating him, by the way, I don't even like him. If they cheat his supporters and his voters and the electorate that calls themselves Republican, if they cheat those folks out of their vote, I'm going to have a big problem with that. I just am.
They have a history of making bad decisions at the moneyed Republican leadership, so it could happen.
But listen, when you say money in the Republican leadership, this is a human nature thing. One of the things I wanted to touch on, and we're going to run out of time, is the super delegate deal with the Democrats. They've got a program built into their delegate system that's designed to make it so that if they don't like what grassroots did, they can spit in their eye. And that's how Hillary is going to win. That's how they put the system together on purpose to cheat. That's what it really is. It's so that their establishment never, ever takes the hands off the wheel, and they're letting all of their people think that their people have some say in this. Well, I guess they do, but holy mackerel, are we splitting hairs about the say that they get? To me, it's a big dog and pony show. At least the Republicans have not... There's a pretense, we walk into this with the thought that there will be some earnestness. You say probably not. I believe it will be there, or I'd already be gone. I do think that if he's by far the leader, the way the math is, that he'll be the nominee. But when I look at my own guy Cruz and then further down the ladder at Kasich, they're obviously hoping for a brokered convention. Now, it may be like the Reagan-Bush deal, which was a brokered convention. They may get into the back room at the convention, and the powers to be say, hey, stop it. You are our nominee, but this is the guy we're going to bolt to the side of your campaign.
Like it or not.
Listen, Reagan did not want George Bush Sr. That was like the poison pill to him. That was like getting a colonoscopy in public. He did not want that man on his ticket. You imagined that, didn't you? I saw the look on your face. I'm just telling you.
I'm thinking about that gown with the open back. Yeah.
Reagan did not want him on there. That's the pill he had to swallow. So when we see brokered convention, it may not be just a question of who the nominee is. It may be the establishment or the Cruz team or both, in fact, fighting each other, irony being what it is, because you got three massive powers in there. The money folks, the Cruz delegation, and the Trump delegation. That's a lot of power in one room, but they have to walk out of that with an answer. So they can either unite before then, or I'm guessing they'll unite there. But in either case, we've got to stop and go to a break. We're late. When we come back, we're going to dive into the Enigma Report.
And now we're back to the Mike Hewitt Show, brought to you by RenegadeRiver.com. It is segment 3, and that means the Enigma Report has arrived.
And now we're going to talk about the money on the left. The money goes on to such wonderful organizations as MoveOn.org and Black Lives Matter. I say All Lives Matter. It goes on to all of these organizations that are then paid protesters. They're sent there to cause the drama that we're watching. They're not. Listen, I've already told you I've been involved in politics since 1976 as a spectator / grassroots volunteer involved. I've been in the picket lines, by the way, and I have also been walking out. I remember walking out of watching George Bush. We're walking out of a George Bush 2004 rally in Holland, Michigan. And it happened with the time that I'm walking out. I was walking out with a bunch of 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. It just was when I left. That's when I left. I was a volunteer that day. So they were one of the last groups to be out. I'm going to guess that the teachers had held them back just to make sure they weren't in the huge crowds. So I'm walking out in the general vicinity of 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. And I know that because I had signs on, by the way. And as we get out to Ottawa Beach Road, which is by the Ottawa County Fairgrounds, we meet protesters, and that's fine, by the way. I support them. Remember me, I'm the guy that writes books. I do shows. I think the First Amendment is what makes us exceptional. I believe that passionately. And so when we were greeted by these folks with the most vile language that you could ever imagine, both spoken and written, against Reagan, who already was dead for several years at that point, I think. I'd have to look at the math, but for certain he was no longer a president. He wasn't anybody. And against Laura Bush, but specifically George Bush. Listen, I'm okay with dissenting opinions. The language was vile. It was over the top. And I'm walking out with 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, and you would think they'd have paused, but they didn't. Now come forward a little bit. We're watching the Trump rallies where you've got 20,000 this and 25,000 that, and that one was a small one. It was only 17,000. And, of course, there are large magnets for people that have an opinion. Trump is one of the things that make Trump so successful is his push against political correctness. I remember my friend Miles, he has the capacity to write a check when we were in high school, wanted to go to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, has all of the resources. His grade point average was stellar, in the cloud stellar. He's a brilliant person. At the time, he was a brilliant young man and had the money to go to MIT and pay for it. Wasn't looking for nobody's money. So he applied. They got an immediate letter back, sorry, we're full. 2 or 3 weeks later, he gets a letter in the mail that says, unless you're, and then it lists a whole bunch of minorities. Suddenly there's a position. Listen, I believe that unless we embrace equality equally, we'll never have it. I passionately believe that. I don't care what color you are, what religion you are. I don't care what you vote for. None of those things matter to me. If you're a U.S. citizen, we are fundamentally equal. Whether we work as hard as each other is another issue, but we're fundamentally equal. And so when Trump pushes back on what he believes as I don't want to put words in his mouth, but inequality, but reverse, political correctness that says you can't say this, you can't say that, you can't feel this way, you're not allowed to feel that way, you're demonized if you feel this way, and he says, hey, stop it. That's not what America was founded on. Stop it. That's not who we are. Man, I agree with him. I just do. And the retort is, well, then you're a racist. No, I'm not. I really am not. And to think that these things all add up, they're grossly insulting. It is, and I heard someone make this, I don't even know where I heard it at, but somebody made this equation. They said, it was a woman that made it. That's important for this, because we're politically correct, you know. A woman made this. She said it's like the classic thing where the woman is raped and we feel bad for the rapist. We chastise the victim. And you know what? She's right. So they go to Trump's rally purposely to cause a problem, and he's made to be the bad guy. And I go, no, he's not. You know, it's one thing to say you have a freedom of speech to stand out in the street and protest. It's fascism to try to shut him down.
Well, it's freedom of speech is of course, the ability for people to speak without government interfering. But you are allowed to express your views on public property, not to go into a private event and disrupt. That is a violation of law. And until we understand that freedom of speech is not the exact same as disrupting other people's ability to speak or hear.
Listen, and then the media, who loves this, by the way, remember I said the hypocrisy of the left, the media loves it. While they're chastising Donald Trump, they're drawing big money off of it. They're showing the clips over and over and over and over to drive up their ratings so that they can charge their listeners or their advertisers more money. They love it. They sensationalize it. So if you walk away from 2 days of TV time and you think there's been 53,000 incidences of it because they play it 24/7 across the cable spectrum, which, by the way, I've come to believe is part of the problem. They play this stuff non-stop.
They make these guys gods.
I'm sorry, I don't know what you just said.
They make these guys gods. Like, they do something wrong and they put their face up there and make them look like
you mean the disruptors?
They glorify them.
Yeah. The criminals. Well, not only that.
That's what I hope they get on TV.
Well,
they do.
Yeah, the guy who did this guy Thomas de Massimo.
That's the guy that jumped the fence and tried to attack him.
Yes.
And the time's gone by. He'd be in jail right now.
Well, there is a rest of the story happening here. The bad news is he was feted, almost like you say, as a hero on CNN, perhaps other television. Remember, a lot of these folks, the American dream in America is just to be on TV for whatever. But there is a rest of the story. Get this. 22-year-old man, this is USA Today, who allegedly attempted to rush a stage. He is now being charged under federal law.
Excellent.
Penalty of 1 year up to 10.
Excellent.
And get this. Here's the way it is. He's charged with impede or disrupt the orderly conduct of a government business or official functions, and that kicks in when you are officially have earned the Secret Service protection.
Right.
So there's very little question
Excellent.
Of what's going on here.
Now the thing that gets
Enforce
me,
it.
The thing that, and I agree with you 100%, Jim. What gets me is that the media flames this fire, and they do what Matt just said. They cause these lunatics to think this is a good idea. They did it with gun violence, and they do it in the political arena.
You bet.
They incite people that are not level-minded to do these actions, and it's evil of them. There's no other word for it. For them solely to grab a little more do-re-mi, knowing that they're risking other people, is just evil to me.
What's ironic about that is if there's a streaker in a baseball game or a football game, the TV cameras immediately go away from him, and the announcers say, "We're not going to show you this guy.
Oh, that's
we're
so
not going to
true.
glorify it."
Yes.
Yeah, it gets in this political thing, and they're all over it. They're
Well, they
doing
love
the
it.
exact opposite.
But listen,
You're putting people's lives in danger.
But listen, here's the funny part. We keep hearing about how the media will parrot it over and over. The violence at Trump rallies, he's inciting violence. First off, they're the ones inciting it, but there's a reason you don't see this nonsense at the uber left groups. You don't see this at Bernie. You don't see somebody like me. I absolutely have campaigned against everything that Bernie stands for 40 years. I can't stand his politics. I think it's detrimental to our grandbaby's future. I really passionately am against him. You don't see me out trying to knock people down that support him.
You're busy running
I'm the other extreme in that. I fight for their freedom to support who they want to support. I don't want to shut any of them down. Welcome to the arena of ideas. May the best ideas win. That's how America is going to be great again.
Only if someone stands tall and makes that argument, and that's the only one out there who's really done that has been Donald Trump.
Yeah, but you know, I agree with you. But listen, I think if there is an establishment or the money people and they're out buying these commercials, that's what they should be doing. They should be saying we're about freedom of speech and we're not about sanctioning or making kudos off of inciting nutty people to do nutty things. When I look at the society, I think, well, we've got a really upside down value system that we ignore folks that are doing some really wonderful things. By the way, on both sides of the aisle, we ignore those things and we got to replay some screwball jumping a fence 53,000 times, hoping there'll be another screwball, or watching the 72-year-old hit the young guy in the face. I get it. That's terrible. But I've seen that thing so many times I've got it memorized. Show me something good that happened once in a while. Incite somebody to do something positive rather than inciting people to do something evil. That's truly how I believe. So when I look at this whole thing, I step back from it, even though I'm not a Trump guy. When I step back, I applaud him for saying what I'd say. If you got up in my face, I'd say the same thing. Do that again, I'm going to punch you in the face. Yep. I would. And most people would. So do me a favor, folks. Find me at Facebook / The Mike Hewitt Show, or on Twitter at Talk Mike Hewitt.